And while the Trump administration pushes its global agenda abroad, we're looking ahead to tomorrow when nuclear talks with Iran are set to resume in Geneva.
Madeleine Rivera is in Washington with all the details. Hi, Maddie.
Good morning, Carly and Todd. So this would be the second round of talks between the U.S. and Iran. The Trump administration has said diplomacy is their preferred option, an approach Iran has indicated they favor too, but there are major gaps between the two sides, particularly on the issue of uranium enrichment. The president saying on Friday Tehran can have no enrichment. The regime, though, has rejected U.S. demands to end that program entirely. Still, Iran's deputy foreign minister tells the BBC they are willing to make some nuclear compromises if the U.S. is willing to talk about lifting sanctions. President Trump has stressed the importance of making a deal, but last week he also did not reject the idea of regime change in the country. In the meantime, he's sending more firepower in the region, directing the USS Gerald Ford, the world's largest aircraft carrier, from the Caribbean to the Middle East. If the U.S. takes action against Iran, Reuters reports it might not look like Operation Midnight Hammer in June, an essentially one-off attack on 3 Iranian nuclear sites. Reuters says per 2 U.S. officials, the U.S. military is preparing for the possibility of sustained weeks-long operations against Iran if President Donald Trump orders an attack in what could become a far more serious conflict than previously seen between the two countries. Over the weekend, Secretary of State Marco Rubio was asked about the possibility of an attack against Iran. Here's his response.
I'm not going to talk about attacks on Iran or anything of that nature because the president's made clear he prefers diplomacy and an outcome of negotiated settlement. Now, we're dealing with radical Shia clerics. Okay, we're dealing with people who make geopolitical decisions on the basis of pure theology, and it's a complicated thing. I mean, no one's ever been able to do a successful deal with Iran, but we're going to try.
The USS Gerald Ford could likely reach the Middle East as early as this weekend. Carly and Todd.
Madeleine Rivera live for us in Washington. Maddie, thank you. Let's bring in former Assistant Secretary of State for George W. Bush and former Naval Intel Officer Robert Charles. Robert, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. A lot going on when it comes to Iran. And a notable comment that the president made on Friday, he said regime change in Iran would be the best thing that could happen. No shock that he feels that way, but that is his most overt endorsement of regime change yet. So with that comment as the backdrop and these conversations taking place tomorrow, what are your thoughts on where things go from here?
Yeah, so good morning to both of you. I think a clear moral position backed up by strength, in this case 2 carrier battle groups, can be highly convincing. That having been said, what Mark Rubio said a moment ago is exactly right. We're dealing with a radical theocracy, one that had no hesitation just weeks ago killing 7,000 to 10,000 of its own people to hold on to power. So on the one hand, what happens when between a rock and a hard place? I think something significant is going to happen. It may be kinetic. I think President Trump is not someone to be toyed with, and I think the Iranians know it. So the only thing that they really have to do is do some internal questioning about whether it's worth dying for the cause, because I honestly think if they do not give ground on the nuclear side, and if they do not give ground on the missile structure that they currently have, at the end of the day, this theocracy is in for some serious kinetic reaction.
Well, Robert, let's talk about that potential significant thing, because as Maddie said, Reuters is reporting that the U.S. military is preparing for the possibility of sustained weeks-long operations against Iran if President Trump does, in fact, order an attack. If that takes place, and that is a big if, what would that look like? Would that be boots on the ground, a strike primarily by air or naval forces? What are we talking about here?
Given President Trump's clear non-interventionist approach to things, I don't see any boots on the ground. What I see is that he's going to try, probably with gradual escalation, to bring home the point that they are in a weak position. What his strike now last year demonstrated is that their air defenses can be fully penetrated with no collateral damage. So I think what he's trying to do is bring reason to a group of people that are guided by their theology rather than by reason. But on the other hand, survival is a very powerful motivator for doing the right thing. And again, strong leadership is often woefully missing. And I'm running for governor in Maine, and I'll tell you right now, strong leadership is not here, and it's not in other parts of the world. And at the end of the day, you've got to have strong leadership in order to turn the dial. What President Trump is saying plainly is, Iran, wake up, do the right thing, or there will be consequences.
That's right. So, Robert, also taking place are these massive protests held around the world. People protesting against the Iranian regime in Munich and beyond. And it's hard to know if the Iranian people know that this is taking place because of that internet blackout. But what are the chances that protesters can rise up inside Iran and defeat this regime themselves?
You know, this is a very important question, and it's a kind of a tick-tock question. What happened is that they did rise up, literally by the tens or hundreds of thousands, depending on how you count. And President Trump, unlike prior presidents, supported them very verbally and very directly. Now you have, in I think, a very persuasive way, protests in all the cities, I mean, all major cities, many major cities, by literally hundreds of thousands, which fortifies President Trump in his position against Iran. And I guarantee in some way, that information is getting into the Iranians, and they will be fortified themselves. So what we would really like to see is maybe the IRGC change sides. But the reality is, unless there's some kind of really powerful persuasive force, I don't see that happening. And of course, again, I just want to emphasize that the Iranians are as ruthless a regime as there ever was. They are a regime that killed 7,000 of their own people, and probably far more than that, just weeks ago. And at the end of the day, you know, if this dial were to turn, if President Trump could be persuasive enough to get them to either vacate power or to change in some significant way, it would be as significant for the future, the stability of the world, as Ronald Reagan turning the dial on the Soviet Union. But this is not an easy turn, because these people are ruthless. They are, as Mark Rubio said, they are radical, and they have no interest in getting rid of the power they have right now.
And they have certainly been an issue since 1979. Also, so people just know, for later this week, so everybody feels prepared going into their work week, the Board of Peace is going to meet on Thursday talking about Gaza reconstruction efforts. So we're going to be watching out for that as well. Robert, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your insight, expertise as always.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.